welcome to episode 249 of School Librarians United. I'm your host, Amy Herman. This podcast is dedicated to the issues and challenges school librarians face every day. As a school librarian in my 17th year, I knew I wanted a podcast which addressed the nuts and bolts of running a successful library program. I don't claim to have the answers, but I hope that this is a platform to share resources and exchange ideas. Now is a perfect time to mention that all the ideas and opinions expressed in this podcast by myself, my interview guests, and listeners who reach out to the podcast are our own and do not reflect those of our school districts. When incorporating research, I always make sure to cite my sources. So whether you are a novice or a veteran school librarian, this podcast has something for you. Last week, Michigan Association of School Librarians celebrated their 50th state conference. And although I was unable to attend, I wanted to give a shout out to the wonderful leaders who have inspired and encouraged me. Kathy Lester and Gwen Marciano have been incredible in making sure I felt supported. I also am especially grateful to all the Michigan school librarians, many of whom were my very first guests on the podcast. And, Michigan school librarians made up a great deal of the content on the early seasons of this show, and for that, they have my heartfelt gratitude. Second only to the state of Texas, we had 23 episodes all dedicated to the talented school librarians in the state of Michigan. They are Kathy Lester, Harry Koffel, as well as Kelly Hinks, Kelly Boston, Patrick Taylor, and Joy Curry, Maggie Rohde, Chelsea Graustra, Carrie Betts, and Lisa Brakel, Dustin McConnell, Suzanne Banwert, Sherry Dobbs, and Terry Belcher. And friends, if you say that's not 23 people, well, actually, you're right, because you know what? I tapped some of them again and again and again, and they always came through for me, and I'm truly grateful. Friends, if you happen to be curious about how many times your state has been featured on the show, all you have to do is look at a link in every show note that we have. It's called Search By, and you too can find out who has been on the show, and you can take a look at which states have been represented and which states haven't. And I would love, love, love to get interviews from school librarians across the United States and in countries that I haven't spoken with yet. So take that as an invitation, please. I welcome you and all listeners to reach out with your feedback and episode suggestions. You can reach me either on Facebook, on X, formerly known as Twitter. My handle is at LMS_United. On Threads, you can find me at School Librarians United, and on Blue Sky at SLU Podcast, or the email address schoollibrariansunited@gmail.com. If you include your mailing address, I'll be sure to send you a podcast sticker. Be sure to listen to episode 224. I announce a sponsorship with Literati Book Fairs, and now is a chance to hear from one of Literati's team members, Kinsey. Kinsey, welcome back to the podcast.
Hello.
So, Kinsey, just for anybody who missed last week's episode, would you give us an idea what it is that you do for Literati?
I am the Fulfillment Center Manager in Elgin. I oversee the packing and distribution for all of our Midwest fairs.
Wonderful. People love your easy setup and how your fairs save elementary schools so much time when we are hosting these Literati Book Fairs. Could you give us an idea what makes your cases and the equipment so easy to use?
I think the main thing is our custom cases. They're designed to be light and easy to maneuver within the schools. We do make sure they come pre-packed, all materials, all items already in the cases. So all you have to do is wheel them to your event space, open the latch, and flip the lids right open. We also make sure all the tabletops are pre-packed, the marketing is included, and everything's just ready to go for everybody.
I really appreciate that because I have vivid memories of setting up book fairs, and this would have been a long time ago, and obviously not with Literati, but the cases that came off of the truck were saran wrapped, and I couldn't get them through the door. So I actually had to have like a pair of scissors or like to take off all the saran and then move all those cases down. I had to get a separate dolly at my doors. I mean, we couldn't even get through the door. It was unwieldy. It was a lot of work. I'm just going to say. So I as school librarians who are receiving these shipments, we are very grateful. Kinsey, I'm curious, how does it feel to know that the books that your team is packing are going to be enjoyed by so many elementary school students?
I think knowing that the strength and importance of our mission is what keeps a lot of us going here. We have a lot of long-term employees, especially in Elgin, and a lot of returning seasonal employees and mothers. I think just knowing the value of what we're doing and remembering our own book fair experiences kind of makes it special and allows us to have a lot of fun to do this job.
Oh, absolutely. Because if it weren't for you, the book fairs just wouldn't happen. So I appreciate this so much. Kinsey, I'm grateful that you joined us today. Thank you so much for everything you do to make the Literati Book Fair experience just so seamless for the school librarians who, get to do this every day and work with Literati. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Tune in to learn all about Literati and their very generous offer. Librarians who book their very first Literati Book Fair for this upcoming school year and mention the code UNITED when booking may qualify to receive a $500 gift card to Titlewave. Visit the link in today's show notes and call the Literati team to see if you qualify. And now a word from our sponsor, Capstone. Capstone is an innovative publisher and education technology provider of children's content for school libraries, classrooms, and at-home learning. Home of the award-winning PebbleGo research database, Capstone has a passion for creating inspired learning and intellectual curiosity in children, and I am so excited to be working with them. I am also grateful to Capstone for their continued commitment to support the podcast in Season 6. They are offering listeners of School Librarians United a very special discount. Visit shop.capstonepub.com and use the code UNITED to get $20 off an order of $100 or more for both print and Capstone interactive ebooks. That's code UNITED for $20 off an order of $100 or more for both print and ebooks on shop.capstonepub.com. And now for our episode, Pleasure Reading Research, and my conversation with Dr. Judy Henning. Friends, I'm so excited. Dr. Henning, welcome to the podcast.
Well, thank you for having me.
Friends, I typically start these conversations with asking guests to describe their library and what they do all day. But, Dr. Henning, would you give listeners an idea of your role in school librarianship?
Okay, well, I have to kind of give you a little background, a little history. I retired in 2018 from Kearney Public Schools after 36 years of teaching. I had spent some time in the classroom, in the language arts classroom, but over 20 years of that time was spent in the library. And the last 15 was spent as the director of the Kearney Public Schools library program. So we just built a new high school. I was in charge of the new library, which was quite an ordeal considering the architect that they called in, the national architect, said they didn't need to put a library in there. And so if you want some interesting reading, when I was in 2018, after our library was opened, and it's gorgeous, gorgeous, gorgeous. It's a collaborative space. I changed the name from library to Library Learning Commons. It's got study carrels for individual groups. It's got areas for just leisurely reading. Great place for project-based learning. In February of 18, I published an article in Teacher Librarian about that. So if you're interested in it, it's something that I'm pretty passionate about. And I was so fortunate that I had a supportive principal that really felt that the library was important and wanted to marry technology and library, which is something that I think is important also. So anyway, I'll get off that topic because that's not what we're here for. But that's where I was at. And then my research partner, Dr. Sherry Crow, I was teaching adjunct classes for her, usually about 2 a semester. And she came to me and she said, I really want you to come teach full-time at UNK. And, I just was at a point where I needed a change. And I think sometimes you realize that, not that I was doing a bad job, but I just wasn't on the cutting edge anymore. I just felt like I kind of needed something else. And so, so I retired in May of 2018 and I started teaching full-time that fall at UNK. So then I am no longer a practitioner, but I am teaching on the university level, and you have to do a lot of research. And so Dr. Crow and I got together, and we, you have to get so many things published in order to move up and get promotion and tenure. And so she was kind of my mentor and helped me with that, because, I had no idea. Here I am starting my second career, and, I'm 65 years old, and I feel like I'm starting out new. And so she really, really helped me. We did a lot of discussing on this particular project that I'm going to talk about today, Adolescent Reading for Pleasure. And it was delayed because of COVID. We had high school kids that we were interviewing. Well, during COVID, they locked those schools down. We could not get in. And not only would the schools not let us in, but our university would not let us do any research. So it was one of those things that just seemed to go on and on and on. And I said to Sherry Crow this summer, I said, now that we're done, I don't know how to act. It just feels like I've got some more to do. But we started out. Now you have to understand that Sherry has her passion is libraries, but it's also motivation. Now she is the one that said, hey, we need to look at this through the theoretical framework of motivation. And I've learned a lot since then, not as much as she knows, but how important motivation is, not only to a library, but in the classroom, getting the kids motivated to do what they're supposed to do, giving them the choice, the autonomy that they need to feel powerful enough to tackle a challenge that they might have. So she had this survey that she had done in some previous research, and we tweaked it so that it asked students about their motivation for reading. That was phase 1 of this study. And let me also tell you where the interest in this started. Like I said, I was Kearney Public Schools library director, K-12, and once a month, all the librarians, elementary, middle school, and high school librarians would meet for our monthly meetings. They were invaluable. And when you talk about being in isolation as far as being a librarian, that is so true. You have to have people that you can bounce ideas off. I always feel sorry for those people that I have in my classes that are from a small town, and they are the K-12 library director. They don't have, the best professional development you can find is right next door, where there aren't any next door libraries. So, what can you do?
How fortunate you were to be able to get together with all the librarians in your district, and thinking about how motivation plays an important role in getting our students to become those lifelong readers.
At those meetings, I would have the elementary, and we had a lot, they were 2-to-1 to the rest of the secondary libraries, librarians. They would say, oh, Joe Blow, he is the best reader. You will just love, love, love having him in middle school because he reads all the time. And middle school librarian gets Joe Blow, and Joe Blow doesn't really like to read. Yeah, he reads, but not much. By the time I got Joe Blow at the high school level, they hated to read. So that was always kind of a passion of mine. I wanted to know what happened between that elementary love to read and the high school. So we decided that we were going to develop this instrument to find students who are intrinsically motivated to read. We decided to get juniors in high school. We could have probably picked sophomores, but we thought seniors were so busy with all their end of the year projects that we decided to do juniors. And so I went to, for our population, I went to 4 schools in central Nebraska. Now, if you looked at a map of the United States and you put your finger right in the middle of it, chances are you'd be in Nebraska, and chances are it would be in the area that I did this research. Now, I tried to also get a diverse population. You don't find that in central Nebraska. You just don't. And so, but I did, we were lucky enough that 60 miles away, we have a Tyson chicken plant, and so that had a huge number, not only Hispanic, but other nationalities. So their diversity was very high. That was kind of important to me. There were 4 schools. Kearney High School, where I taught at, was one, and then a Class B. That's a Class A school, Class B, C, and D school as far as size went. All of the students that were in a regular English, an AP, or an honors English class were invited to be a part of this study. When I went and talked to them, I said, we're looking for people who like to read. Now, that kind of eliminated half of them because they said, I hate to read. I don't want to read. I don't want to read. So they kind of pared down the numbers themselves. And, of course, they're in high school, so we have to have not only an agreement from the parents, but from them. And we had to do it twice because we had 2 phases of this study. So we have this instrument, and I go around and I talk to them. I said, if you'd like to be a part of this study and take the test to see if you're intrinsically motivated to read, bring back your permission forms.
Yeah, Dr. Henning, can I ask you a question? Because, I found that I'm rather new to high school. This is my 3rd year in high school. I've taught elementary before. But when you ask students, I'm just curious, because asking students to self-identify as readers, I wonder, it would be interesting, did you ask them in a way that they could answer privately? Or were they in a group where they would be identifying as readers in front of their peers?
No. They decided on their own. It was, here's the forms, I passed them out to everybody. If you want to participate in this study, bring it back with both your parent's signature and your signature. And so, and I even had, and it didn't work very good sometimes, I even had, for those people who didn't participate in the study, there was a junior literacy quiz that they took on Google Forms just to keep them busy. So they either did that or they did my assessment to determine if they were intrinsically motivated to read.
Can I ask you, though, Dr. Henning, I'm curious, because I'll be honest, when I was in high school, I did not consider myself a reader because I read nonfiction. And can I ask, did your questionnaire to get this core group of students to participate in your study, did it differentiate what kind of reading you were looking for when you asked for students if they identify as readers, whether nonfiction or reading graphic novels or manga? Did it matter what kind of reading they enjoyed?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. I was just curious.
Because there are a lot of kids that refuse. They think it's a waste of time for them to read fiction, and they just love the biographies, the autobiographies, reading for knowledge, that type of thing. So, but I don't really think, as far as getting those people to take the test, I don't think that really impacted them that much. So anyway, so then so that required me to go to to all the schools twice. I had to go to tell them about the study, and then I had to go to get the forms and to have them take the test. It was all online. It was in a Google form. So I just went there. All I had to do was give them the URL, and they went and took the assessment. Now, we had 102 that volunteered to take the assessment. Unfortunately, when we went to look, 2 of them did not qualify because they had to be juniors. One was a sophomore and one was a senior. So that brought it down to 100. And since I'm kind of math dyslexic, that 100 number was wonderful to work with. But anyway, we ended up with 100 that took the test. And then we went through and we evaluated it. We had the ways to evaluate the assessment, and then went in. And those that were highly motivated to read, we ended up getting 24 out of 100. And that was kind of a large number. And we wondered why that would be, because if they made it to the final round, they got a $25 gift card. So we wondered if maybe they were just, trying to answer some of the questions not the way they really felt, but what would make them look good. And so we recognized that might be at fault. So we had 24 that were intrinsically motivated to read. We started in the spring, and we did Zoom interviews with them. Well, they were pretty familiar with Zoom by that time because they had all been through COVID. We did Zoom interviews with 14, and of the 14, 9 were girls and 5 were boys. However, I really have to say, my male subjects were so informative. It seemed like the girls, we'd get done a little before an hour was up. The boys, I could probably go for 2 hours because they were very talkative about what they liked and, just kind of, well, this is the way it should be. Very, had a sense of self and knew what they wanted. And it was just fun to interview. Now, I interviewed every one of them. Dr. Crow, who left. Now, I forgot to tell you this story. Well, Dr. Crow hired me at UNK, and then a year later, she leaves me. So I'm in charge of the whole program. So she went to Fort Hays State in Kansas, and she's in charge of the graduate program there. It's going to retire in May, but anyway, so she was in Kansas, and she missed some of the interviews just because of her job. But I did get an opportunity to talk to all of them. And it was just a thrilling, exciting experience. We taped all of them, and we had a dialogue, which I can't remember how many pages. I want to say it was like 76 pages of dialogue in like 8-point type. And we went through and got some really good feedback from these students. So phase 1 was they were identified. Phase 2, they did the Zoom, and then we put together a result.
So, Dr. Henning, it might not surprise high school librarians, but for the benefit of everybody tuning into this conversation, could you give us a little bit of background as to what the literature has to say about students' interest in reading for pleasure as they get older? Because, I think as somebody who's worked a lot with younger students, this is a relatively new group of students for me to be working with. But what would you say has been fairly well established in the literature?
Well, research shows that by the time they get to be high school students, they aren't reading for pleasure. And I think that there are reasons for that. First of all, they're busy with school. They're no longer reading for enjoyment, but rather for information for their classes. They just don't have the time to read. It's competing with a lot of things. You have to realize there's television, there's their phones, there's a lot of things that are out there that are taking its place. And so every year they take these surveys and they find out that more and more people students aren't reading for pleasure. We need to change that. And as school librarians, I think it is our charge to make our students be in a culture of reading. And that culture of reading, it's hard. It's hard to establish. But I think if you know what students are looking for and what they like about librarians and books and, matching them up with the right books, you can start to do that in your own library. Now, we should every one of us should want to do that because research has also shown that students do better on achievement tests. They do better in, this was interesting and it came out in our study, socially emotionally. They are socially emotionally better prepared if they are an avid reader. Their careers are more successful. They're better problem solvers and critical thinkers. Okay, all those are things that we're working on in high school. And the basis for it is to be a good reader. And I've always said, the more you read, the better you are at reading. And so, we need to match those people up with good books. Now, you talked about self-determination theory. Now, I review a lot of research for library magazines, periodicals, scholarly journals. And, you do not have to have a theoretical framework to do research. But motivation just fits so perfectly into this one that it was just hard not to include it. And self-determination theory is autonomy, giving students a choice, letting them decide. Competence, are they able to read those books? Do we give them the skills so that they can read it? And relatedness, how they relate to those books with their family, with their friends, and with librarians. Now, I know you want me to say that all of the students talked about their school librarians. Now, they all knew about them, but I had a lot of people talking about public librarians. And I kind of asked them why, and they said, well, because they're available all year long. You know, I don't. Now they like their school librarians too. Don't get me wrong, but a lot of them talked about their public librarians and the relationships that they had with them. And I think now is a good time to talk about the one of the main things that came out in this research. And it surprised me. I'm an old librarian. I've been around forever. I knew how important it was to connect students with books. The reference question, reader's advisory. I really wanted to find them a good book, and it was pretty easy. When they were reading a certain series, I'd make sure I had the next series for them, and I'd say, "Hey, Joe, don't forget to stop by the library. I just got the new book in," and they'd say, "Oh, great," But I had no idea how important this was to those students. It was a rapport building. I mean, there was this one boy that talked about his school librarian and how she saw him in the hall, and she said, "Oh, by the way, we got that book in that you've been waiting for." Now, if you're a reader, you know what it's like to be reading a series, and then all of a sudden you're done, and the next one doesn't come out for 2 months. It's like going through withdrawal, literally. And so this boy was so excited. He went in. Well, they had gotten the book in, but it wasn't processed. And he talked about how they processed the book right in front of him so he could check it out and take it with him. Now, again, I knew the importance of reader's advisory questions from the students, but I did not know the rapport building that was taking place at that time. And that was true for public librarians too. So finding a good book, matching yourself up with a good book, we already knew when we went into this research that reading to your children is important. I did not know that as they get older, it's still important, not necessarily to read to them, but at the dinner table, what are you reading now? I'm just finishing this book. It was really great. I think you would like it. Or, boy, don't read this book. It wasn't very good, and I'll tell you why. That type of thing. So with families, that conversation at the dinner table, there was also experiences with friends. By the time you get to be juniors in high school, your clique of friends, you have similar tastes. And we found that a lot of them, in fact, they knew each other, the other people that were being interviewed by me, because they, had talked about it. And would kind of, although not a lot of them were a member of a book club, and I always had book clubs in my high school, and they were probably the most exciting thing that I did. We read a variety of genres. I talked about how we have a low diversity percentage at my high school. Boy, we can read The Hate You Give, and they could learn what it's like. So when they go out in the real world, where it is more diverse, they had a little bit of background. So anyway, they would have their little. They wouldn't be called book clubs, but they would discuss books and how it affected them and what they liked about it.
When it comes right down to it, all of us who work with students day in and day out, we really want to be able to support our students' reading preferences. And so let's go and start to look at some of the things that your research revealed about your students' reading choices.
That was very true. They, and this was true when I was a school librarian. When they were reading for pleasure, they preferred the book. I don't know if it's just the feel of it or what it is, but students like to read print. However, the students that I interviewed, they would read anytime they had extra time, they would read. And that would be a break during work, waiting in line because there's road construction. I mean, they would literally read every minute they had. Now, what happened is they might not always have that print book with them, but they had their phone. And so then they would read it digitally. And I also found that those students that are voracious readers, I mean, like read maybe 1 or 2 books a week, they would tend more to be the digital readers. They would be the ones that would get their books from Sora. And it was funny when we moved to our new high school, I thought everything was working fine. We had our new school, and of course we had different IP addresses. And I had like 5 kids come in, and Mrs. Henning, we can't get on Sora. We can't get these books. And I didn't know that. Well, yeah, it was a glitch. It hadn't been put in correctly. I do think people who are students who are really voracious readers, they end up reading digitally just for the convenience of it, But it seems like most of it. Now, that's not true when it comes to research. They prefer digital research over carrying 10 books out of the library. That's just the way it is. And most of them, they wait to the last minute to do their research, and it's got to be at midnight, and those databases are available 24/7. So, research is usually done digitally with the databases. One of the students said, I said, now, which do you like, print, or do you like to read a digital book? And she said, oh, if I'm reading a digital book, it feels like an assignment. So that was her comment.
So for me, I do try to encourage my students, especially those who are very reluctant to read. If they're reading, I was like, have you ever tried to listen to this book? Because we have the audiobook as well, and especially if it is a novel in verse. Because I tell the students, I'm like, this is like poetry, and it's being performed. And if you listen to it, for me, it's also like Shakespeare. If you listen to Shakespeare, I understand it much better than if I read Shakespeare. And so I've had opportunities to encourage our digital platform because I have students who are not as excited about reading it as they might be, trying to take the book in another platform. So, but I agree, because whenever I've talked to my students about listening to a book or reading it digitally on a screen or on their phone, they're like, Mrs. Herman, I don't want to hurt your feelings, but I want to hold the book. And I was like, oh, I get that too. It's discouraged if I'm trying to drive. I can't hold the book when I'm trying to drive.
And I'm an avid reader. I do, or listener to books, and it takes a little bit. You have to train yourself. And I think you identified yourself as a audio learner. It would take a little bit longer for someone who's a visual learner, I think, to learn how to listen to books.
Absolutely. Dr. Henning, when it comes to reading programs, because I think it's so easy, I think of my elementary librarians who have been very accustomed to things like AR and having, reading programs where students are supposed to read a certain amount of minutes each night. When it comes to your high school subjects who were participating in this research that you were doing, how did reading programs fare in the research that you were doing with these high school students?
I really wanted to know that. And I was surprised. It was just like I asked them about reading programs and go, oh, yeah, you're talking about that AR. I said, well, or any program, incentive program that your school library might have done. And it was just kind of like, yeah. But the only thing they said that was interesting was, well, I did kind of like it when you got a pizza for so many books you read, because I had pizza coupons coming out the wazoo. I was just into all these coupons. I did have them tell me that when they did these reading, AR reading or just a reading program that maybe the school librarian had decided where they have the number of books that they have read, some of them did say, I didn't realize what a good reader I was until we did that. And so that I thought that was a little bit interesting and stuff, but that was not their motivation at all to read. They, and now maybe if I did another study and I looked at marginal readers, maybe that would be incentive for them. But I think the fact that the rewards that they usually get for the reading programs are not intrinsic, but extrinsic, I don't think it will last. So at least that's what the research tells us. And I'm just not I think AR is okay. And I just think there can be other things that can be done that would be better than AR. Because some people are intimidated by the AR tests too.
This sort of goes along with this idea of incentives to read. And last week, I was very fortunate to interview a librarian, and we were talking about a book launch party. And in this case, these were middle school students who were pulled from their fourth period a little early so that they could participate in all these activities building up to this new book that was coming out and was the next book in a series, and celebrating these students who identify as readers, but they got to leave class early to go to a party that was happening in the library. And it was seen as a reward. It was like, you are a reader, you identify as a reader, and this very unique group of students were coming together to celebrate the launch of a next book in a series. And it was sort of fun because this librarian was giving them that recognition as readers and saying, you know what, you get to leave class early because we're going to go celebrate in the library. And meanwhile, you've got the rest of the class sitting there going, oh, wait, I want to do that too.
I agree. I don't think, I just, I cry for those kids that don't get to go to the end of the school party because they didn't meet their AR goal. And maybe, they're going to put up a good front and say, oh, I don't care. I don't like to read. I don't care. But, I don't like that. I think there's other ways that we can incentivize reading for students.
I did want to back up. I was able to meet Dr. Henning in Italy. So there was, a combination of so many different librarians coming from all over the world. And so Dr. Henning, I met you and I met Sherry in Rome. We were able to, spend time together at these hour-long lunches with all these lovely bottles of wine. And, we'd have breakfast together or lunch together or the dinners that we enjoyed as well. But it was really fun because I got to meet both of you together when you were able to share this, your findings with the other attendees at this conference. Can I just ask, did you and Dr. Crow get together in person when you were back in the States, or this was purely a remote collaboration?
Because Sherry was in Kansas, it was a remote collaboration, other than the fact that I did the legwork going to the schools.
So, but I was curious, I'd love for you to share with listeners what some of your students revealed to you about their emotions associated with reading, because I think librarians would like to assume we know what students feel when they read, but maybe, you've done something that's far more intentional in terms of collecting from your study subjects what reading did for them emotionally.
I think as educators, I was surprised that after COVID, there was a huge increase in issues with students and social emotional. And these students, although they didn't talk specifically about that, it was very evident that they used reading as an escapism so that they didn't have to cope at the time with any social emotional that was going on. And by putting distance between those issues and the reading, they were better at coping with social emotional issues. And that was something that really kind of surprised me. I guess it shouldn't have maybe, but this is a group of students that you will never hear the words, I'm bored. You know how you hear that all the time? I'm so bored. Oh, I'm so bored. Well, these kids aren't bored because the minute they have an extra minute, they are reading. And so they don't dwell on maybe some of the things that were said to them in the day by some of their friends that they didn't like. And so, it's that escape that they get from reading their books. So that was something that was very interesting.
Well, and along those same lines, you also were able to ask students what were the reasons why they like to read. And I find this so telling because I don't think that this has changed much in the past couple of years that have lapsed since you did your research.
Actually, this was Dr. Crow's idea. We had what we called reading episodes. And one of the questions was the students had to think of a time when they really wanted to read, And then we went through and how did you feel? Where were you at? What were you doing? Did you get to read? What were you reading? Basically, it was a time passer for them. And anytime they had some extra time, they were looking to read the book that they had with them. So, and they like to read outside in their bedroom, waiting for their brother or sister to get off football practice or whatever. They always use that extra time to read. If they were waiting in the doctor's office, they had a book out. So that was very typical of every one of them. And by the way, all of these students that we interviewed, and this did kind of surprise me. All of them were outstanding students. I mean, they were in AP classes, honors classes. They were involved in at least one sport. They were very good high school students. I've been a teacher long enough. I know that most of the readers are good students, but I've had some that instead of going to class, they would skip school and go to the park and read all day. Another study right there. I think I'm going to do that.
Dr. Henning, I love this because you provided this fantastic pie chart. And friends, 46% of your respondents mentioned that they were opportunistic readers. And I love that because I don't know if my students would have necessarily called themselves opportunistic readers. I think they would recognize they don't like to be bored or waiting. I think about how often we reach for our phones when we are caught, waiting for something like an appointment or we're sort of stuck in line somewhere. I'm thinking about the, Department of Motor Vehicles. If you didn't have your phone, if you had your book, you'd be in good shape. But the next largest would be you had students who described themselves as addicted to reading. Were those their words? I'm curious.
Yes, they were. Mm-hmm.
They said they were addicted to reading.
Yeah.
And, play this out for me. I mean, if I had a student who said, Mrs. Herman, I am addicted to reading, I would not be able to look at them the same way again. Like I would see them not just as readers, but as ones who would, these are students who would lose sleep so they could read. These are students who might find themselves wanting to read instead of go back to class.
Well, and I just talked about, some of the students that we know that love to read too much and they let their schoolwork go so that they can read. But I think these readers that we interviewed, they may say they're addicted to reading, but they know when they have to do their schoolwork and when they have time to leisurely read.
Wow. I love this. And it is, I know that many of my readers, what the kinds of things that they like to read, because I recently asked them, I said, listen, I'm spending money right now. Please tell me what you would like me to buy. Can you give us, what were the kinds of things that your study subjects revealed about what kinds of things they enjoy reading?
I was kind of surprised that very few of this group like graphic novels, because graphic novels was a genre that a lot of my students liked. A lot of these were, I remember one boy reading nonfiction or reading fiction books to him was just a waste of time and don't even talk to me about it. But you give me a war on strategies of war, and he was all in. I mean, he loved, and he'd read the same books over and over again to make sure that he understood why that particular general used that strategy to win that battle. Obviously, he wants to go into the military when he graduates from high school or from college, and he was that was his read of choice. I also had one student which really surprised me because I didn't read studies until I was working on my doctorate. They love to read studies. They wanted to know what they were doing, asking what they were, what the population was. And it was interesting because I know they knew how to read them because I learned what you could jump over to get to the result. And they knew how to do that too. So, it was that was interesting. Not all that, there were a lot of them though that preferred to read fiction books and had and typically the Harry Potter series, all those that everybody knows about. They just loved those and would read them not once but twice or 3 times. They like to read a book over again.
I have found in my personal interactions with my students that many of my students would admit to reading something again and again and again, but they felt like apologetic about it. They're like, oh, but I've read this book before, but I love this book. And it was like, you don't need to explain. If you like to read a book again and again, you are more than welcome. For many people, it's like watching a favorite movie or listening to a favorite song. It's very comforting. I wanted to ask you especially about bullying because you got some feedback from students and they mentioned bullying because they were readers. And I'm hoping that you'll speak a little bit to that because I think it reveals something that we should all be aware of.
Yes, and I was not aware of it. And I would end all of my Zoom interviews with, is there anything else that I need to know? Is there something I missed? Anything you want to tell me? And this one girl said, please tell everyone not to let them make fun of you for your reading. She goes, now, I'm a junior in high school. She goes, so I got over it. But in middle school, they would just say, oh, she just likes to read. She's just a reader. Can you believe she likes to read? And we're making fun of her. And so to the point where she said, I would read in isolation. She goes, I wouldn't read with my friends. I'd read at home, and she wanted me to make sure that that other students knew that she was the winner in that bullying. That the students who were not readers were not the more good students, good student like she was. So. Yeah, and that kind of surprised me. It was just one individual, and it was towards the end. Had she said that it been one of the first ones, I might have added that and said, have you ever felt like you were bullied, because of your reading? But it wasn't. So, it was. She was very sincere that she wanted me to make sure that I told my readers that.
I think it's fascinating because when you consider. Librarians embrace this identity. And for those of us who have been in this profession for a long time, we have identified as readers. And the idea of anybody questioning us, I'm an adult. If you think I like books, that's fine. I truly, it's not going to disturb me what you happen to decide you think I'm like. But as a student, as a child, as an emerging young adult, you've got people who are just figuring out who they are, and it is you see them as such vulnerable beings because they are growing up into themselves and learning about themselves. And for somebody to use a book against them, like, oh, you're always reading a book, and it's like, okay, what's wrong with that? It's like, I think it says more about the kid who hurled the insult or meant it for it to be an insult. And so I think that all the more reason why school librarians have to champion our students who love to read and not single them out, but to raise them up and celebrate them as readers, because it is something that it really can truly define who they become as adults. If they love to read as students, there's a very good chance they'll love to read as adults. And you mentioned earlier when we talked about how this idea that your study subjects mentioned the rapport that they had with their school librarian, that this was somebody who they felt was an ally in their reading journey.
Yes. And they, again, and either the school librarian or the public librarian, they had they were on a first name basis, and, felt this, it empowered them that those librarians knew what they liked to read and was always looking out for what they might read next and trying to match them up with the perfect book.
Well, and, I want to just pick apart something that was in your presentation. You said here, if school administrators understood the impact pleasure reading has on academic achievement as well as the emotional well-being of students, they might be more likely to allow more time for reading for pleasure during the school day, even in secondary. And I think about our drop everything and read time. I think about our DEAR time, or, this dedicated reading time that has been something I'm very aware of at an elementary level and especially at a middle school level. It is rare to hear about high schools allowing for a dedicated silent sustained reading time that is anything more than something that we do during, March's Reading Month, or, celebrating libraries. And it's something of a novelty. It's not part of the everyday unless you have an ELA teacher who makes it part of their everyday. But I now work in a school with 57-minute long class periods. I am convinced nobody is teaching for 57 minutes. They're not. They're giving their students, hey, if I get X kind of behavior for the first 45 minutes, you can have the last, 13 minutes of class to, ding around on your phone or talk to your friends. But where is that silent sustained reading at the high school level? Because for me, there is a missed opportunity here, because I have yet to see a teacher use the 57 or 58 minutes that we allocate each of those subjects every single day.
When we had sustained silent reading at my high school, and we really promoted it, teachers would put a sheet of paper on the window saying, well, I'm reading this book. And there was 20 minutes, it was every 3 days that they had to read. And the worst people to do it were the teachers. They were supposed to read too. And they use that time to grade papers, to do, and then they're letting their kids go to the bathroom, and they're taking long bathroom breaks and disturbing people in the other classes. And it was a school improvement goal to increase our reading scores. And that was one of our strategies that we were using to try to get those scores up. And it was actually lack of buy-in from our faculty. And
that's disappointing.
It was, but and I did the good fight for as long as I could, and then it just didn't work.
Yeah, Dr. Henning, it is something I whenever we put something out into the world, we hope that our work will have a positive impact beyond our immediate reach. And what do you hope will happen as a result of this research that you conducted with Dr. Crow?
Again, let's get back to the culture of reading. It's not going to happen overnight. But I think if you every year you take a couple, 2 or 3 of these strategies, providing, matching students up with good books, maybe take the time to teach yourself, to add some new ways to find the right books for students. Teachers who want to build a culture of readers have to match those students up with good books. And to do that, they have to there's different apps out there. Like, for example, what do you read? What should I read next? That's an application. I had that actually linked on my school library webpage. so students could use that, and become autonomous to find out books on their own. And also right now, and it gets kind of a bad rap, but there's artificial intelligence out there that you can use to plug in the titles of different books that you liked, books that you didn't like, books you kind of liked, and they will take that information and come up with a list of new books that you might be interested in reading. So, make yourself be a good advisor. Do all those book talks. I had so much fun doing book talks when I was a school librarian, and it was always so fun because I knew if it was a good book talk, because the students would come in and immediately take the book off the shelf. So keep doing that. Keep matching those students up with good books, because if you do that, you are going to build a culture of readers.
Dr. Henning, you are wonderful. I am so grateful. I would love for you, before you leave, tell us just a little bit about the program that you teach in, because I've got listeners who are always looking for a place where they can get the certification to become school librarians. And I know that you're part of that program. Would you let us know? Because I want to make sure we put a link in our show notes.
Yes. The University of Nebraska at Kearney is one of 2 universities in the state of Nebraska that offers the classes to become a endorsed school librarian. It is a graduate program. So my students are most of them, not all of them, but most of them are all teachers who want to add that endorsement. Some may want to move into the library realm. And luckily in Nebraska, we have a requirement that if you have X number of students, you have to have a school librarian. So most high schools have one that are of any size, middle schools and then elementary. So there is a demand, and we have a big demand for school librarians in the state. And we are, one of the biggest things we have to do is teach people that a librarian is not what it used to be. A librarian is a collaborative teacher with a collaborative person that works with the classroom teachers on research projects and project-based learning. I think there's still that idea that a librarian is defined by the number of books they check out, or the collection that they manage. And teaching people that there is a difference is really, really important. School librarians should be instructional leaders. They should be really involved in their school improvement at their school, because who knows better what is being taught in the classroom than the school librarian, because they are ordering extra materials for that particular topic, And so the classes that I teach are all graduate classes, because most of the teachers are in the classroom during the day. And they can, at my university, they can get it 3 ways. They can go just for the endorsement, or they can go for a master's degree in curriculum instruction with school library concentration, or they can get instructional technology. It's called Learning Design and Technology now. They changed the name, with a school library concentration. So there's 3 avenues that they can pursue: 2 master's degrees or just the endorsement. And sometimes if they already have a master's degree, they just want to get the endorsement.
Dr. Henning, listeners will want to know, do you have an option to take this remotely? Is it synchronous? Is it asynchronous?
It's all online. My students are full-time teachers. They have to be able, they're good at managing their time, but they have to be able to do it whenever they can. And so it is all online.
Fantastic. Dr. Henning, you have been an absolute joy. I'm grateful to you and to Dr. Sherry Crow, who have put together all of this work. I know that listeners are going to be able to find your presentation in the show notes and do that deep dive alongside with you. And you've included some fantastic resources. I'm so grateful. Thank you so much. Can I ask, do you like to be online if listeners wanted to follow you on social media, or are we better just reaching out through your university connections?
Probably through my university connections. I probably should have more of a footprint in social media, but most of my social media is personal.
I truly appreciate the time you spent with us today. Thank you so much, Dr. Henning.
Thank you.
If you found this episode helpful, please share it out with your team, your PLN, and on social media. Be sure to follow on your favorite podcatcher so you'll never miss an episode. And if you really like listening today, consider leaving a review wherever you listen to podcasts. Reviews help others find us. Friends, we are in for a treat. Before we go, we've got Stephanie Charlefort, a returning guest to the podcast. You might remember her from episode 172. She was my partner in crime when we were presenting at AASL 23 in Tampa just recently. So, I do appreciate having a ride or die come back on the show and is here to share with us a fun opportunity for listeners of the show to get involved. And I'm so grateful that you're here today. Stephanie, tell us about this opportunity.
Thank you so much for having me, Amy. I am contacting everyone on behalf of AASL's National Standard Committee. So there is a group of us who are working to revise the standards that just came out. It feels like just yesterday, but it was actually about 8 years ago when they started the new standard process. And we are tasked with revising them. And so I would like help in knowing, the committee, we would like help in knowing what is going well with the standards, what can be improved in the new iteration of the standards. So that's why I'm on your show today.
Wonderful. And so I love it. It always makes me laugh when I hear we're going to get feedback from our stakeholders.
Yeah.
But this time,
so official, right?
I know, but this time we really mean it because if there's one thing I value more than anything, it's the opinions of school librarians. I don't hold anybody in as high regard as I do a fellow school librarians. So if we choose to chime in on this survey, you can be assured that we have some fairly strong opinions, and you're sort of putting yourself out there to receive them. So let me ask you, give us, first of all, most importantly, what is the time frame? Because this is obviously a limited opportunity, and we've got friends who listen to this podcast, and we may have been beyond that window of opportunity. So would you, first of all, give us an idea of what is the window of opportunity that you are hoping to hear from school librarians everywhere?
Sure. So it's going to open up on Monday, November 6th, and it is closing on November 20th. So you have just about 2 weeks worth of time to pop onto the website, which will be listed in the show notes. So you can click the link and you'll go to the landing page for all the surveys, because there's different versions of it, which we'll talk about here in just a moment, I think. But you'll have the 2 weeks to do it. And we really do want to hear your feedback. We really need to hear the feedback in order to improve them.
So inquiring minds want to know, just how discerning are you about who chimes in? Because I'm going to tell you right now, our listening audience, we've got folks across the board in their journey as school librarians. And we also have an international audience. So tell us, who is eligible to contribute to this collection of feedback that you are undertaking?
So really anyone and everyone who has familiarity with the standards. Because if you are a first-year librarian who just left the practice, or you're a veteran who's a 25-plus year school librarian, you all have opinions on what has been working or not working with the standards. So we want to hear from everyone. You do not need to be a member of ALA or AASL. It's open to anyone and everyone. So the only requirement is that you have some type of background information in the foundations and the standards, so you can answer the questions about them. That's basically it.
Fantastic. I do appreciate, sometimes we feel like things are just sort of manifested out of thin air. And I appreciate that anytime somebody takes this additional step to make sure that whatever is out there is being kept current and reflects the actual practices that's happening in our school libraries every day. So I do appreciate that this is an effort on your part and your committee's part to make sure to stay relevant and to actually reflect what we do. So, Stephanie, I'm so grateful. We'll make sure to include a link in the show notes, and we'll push this out on social media. But thank you so much. I know you're really busy on this committee, and I know it's a lot of work. So I'm hoping that listeners who are tuning in right now will take an opportunity to visit the link in our show notes. And again, we've got a window of November 6th to the 20th. So friends, if you're listening after that, and this is in 2023, please know we appreciate the feedback that you give, because it honestly helps us making relevant changes to the standards that currently exist. So Stephanie, I know that you have had a busy fall. I'm hoping that you are going to have a little bit of downtime now that your committee responsibilities maybe have been cooling off. But I know they have not been cooling off. Well, I'll tell you what, our presentation together in Tampa was super fun. And again, friends, I highly recommend anytime you present at a conference that you pick a friend, pick a buddy that you can present with, because it definitely makes things more fun. But Stephanie, I really hope that you guys get the kind of information that you need to make the implement the changes that you want to do.
Yes, and I'm going to put one more plug in and just say that I know the podcast is usually our school librarian colleagues who listen to it, or people who want to become school librarians, but we have surveys out there for more than just school librarians. So we have administrators, because sometimes they have no idea what's going on in our school libraries, but then you come across a few who actually do. And so we want their feedback. We want the feedback of the lists. So the future librarian educators like myself, an adjunct instructor, as well as full-time professors. We want your feedback on how the standards went. AASL chapters in every state, your leadership is going to get a survey directly targeted them, because we want to know what kind of professional development you want for those standards. So be looking for that if you're a chapter president, vice president, executive director, whatever your structure is. Be looking for that email. And then we also are actually looking for if you collaborate with someone in your building, like you just have that good relationship. Like there are times, like especially as a secondary school librarian, where you collaborate so closely with a classroom teacher. If you could go onto the standards website and find the education collaborator survey and send it to them, we'd like to hear what their feedback is too. So
wow,
we're looking at it from a lot of different directions. So
I was going to say, apparently other people's opinions matter too.
I know, right?
Very well-rounded.
All-inclusive field.
Exactly.
All-inclusive field.
All the opinions.
Want everyone's input.
All the opinions. Yep. All right. Stephanie Charlefort, you are wonderful. Thank you so much. And I hope you have a fantastic evening. And thanks for chiming in today.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it, Amy.
One last friendly reminder, friends, use the code UNITED to take advantage of Capstone's generous $20 discount off an order of $100 or more, and librarians who book their very first Literati Book Fair for this upcoming school year and mention the code UNITED when booking may qualify to receive a $500 gift card to Titlewave. Visit the link in today's show notes and call the Literati team to see if you qualify. The topic of our next episode has yet to be finalized, but I can guarantee I will use this space to spotlight a school librarian sharing resources and strategies you can hopefully use in your space today. I hope you will tune in.